Malison. The first time I heard the word, it wasn't spoken aloud. It was written, a single word scrawled into the inside cover of a book I found tucked behind a loose stone in the cellar. Malison. The letters were jagged, gouged into the paper as though carved with something sharp. I remember running my fingers over the grooves, feeling the uneven depth of each stroke. The cellar smelled of damp rot and iron, its stone walls slick with condensation. A naked bulb swung above me, its filament buzzing faintly, throwing the shadows into slow, rhythmic motion. Dust floated like pale insects in the beam of light. That word stayed with me. When I closed my eyes that night, I saw the letters etched into the dark, burning faintly like embers on the inside of my eyelids. I told myself it was nonsense, some forgotten vandalism from decades past. But the word had weight. It lingered the way smoke lingers on fabric, sinking deeper with every hour, until I felt as though I was carrying it inside me. The house itself was unremarkable when I first arrived, old but sturdy, with crooked floors and wallpaper yellowed at the edges. The smell of it was what struck me most, the faint sweetness of dust mixed with something sourer, something like decayed fruit left too long in a bowl. That scent clung to the curtains, the carpets, even the wood of the banister. No matter how wide I opened the windows during the day, the smell never thinned. At night, the house felt heavier. The silence pressed into me, thick and oppressive, broken only by the groans of timber contracting in the cold. The walls seemed to draw closer in the dark. Shadows would stretch long across the floorboards, quivering as though the house was holding its breath, waiting for me to falter. It was in the cellar that the weight of it all grew unbearable. Every time I descended the steps, the air changed. Colder, yes, but also thicker, as though I was stepping beneath the surface of water. My ears would pop faintly, my skin prickling with a clammy sweat. Down there, light refused to settle. The bulb would hum, flicker, and sometimes dim to a sullen orange glow. The book with the carved word wasn't the only thing hidden. Behind that loose stone, I found others, scraps of parchment browned with age, marked with symbols I didn't understand. Circles, jagged crosses, lines broken by tiny notches. The smell of them was sharp, almost acidic, as though they'd been soaked in vinegar. Some had stains that looked black, but carried the metallic tang of old blood. I tried to push it from my mind, told myself these were relics, forgotten superstitions, but the word followed me. I began to dream differently. Not dreams with narrative or form, but dreams of weight and sound. I would wake to the sensation of something pressing down on my chest, pinning me into the mattress, my lungs fluttering like trapped birds. The sound was always the same, low, guttural, as though someone was whispering directly into the cavity of my skull. The syllables were indistinct, but the cadence was deliberate, ritualistic. When I woke in the mornings, I could never remember the words exactly, but the taste of them lingered. Metallic, foul, like pennies held too long on the tongue. The mirrors in the house changed too. At first, it was subtle, my reflection lagging a moment behind, the glass fogging faintly though no heat touched it. Then I began to see distortions. My face seemed longer, eyes deeper, the skin around my mouth too tight. Once, brushing my teeth, I looked up and saw not my own mouth moving, but the carved letters of Malison stretching across my teeth like blackened gum. When I blinked, it was gone, replaced with my own pale face, sweat shining on my forehead. The curse wasn't loud. It didn't shout or crash or scream. It seeped, slowly. I began to notice things in the corners of the house. A faint scratching inside the walls at night, as though nails dragged along the plaster. The smell of iron stronger some evenings, especially in the stairwell, where the shadows seemed to cling more tightly than anywhere else. My fingertips would come away stained faintly red after touching the banister, though the wood itself looked clean. The cellar grew worse. The bulb blew one night with a faint pop, leaving me in darkness so absolute I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I climbed the stairs as fast as I could, but the door at the top refused to open. My lungs convulsed, throat tightening as though hands pressed invisible around my windpipe. Just before my knees buckled, the door swung free with a groan, and I collapsed into the hallway gasping for air. Behind me, the cellar breathed. I swear I heard it, a slow, steady exhale, as if something deep within its stone walls was satisfied. I stopped going down there, but it didn't matter. The curse wasn't bound to the cellar anymore. It was bound to me. My skin began to itch, a crawling sensation that moved from limb to limb, never constant, always shifting. When I scratched, I found nothing but faint bruises beneath the surface, as though fingers had been pressing into me during the night. My nails broke the skin once, leaving deep welts. The blood that welled up was darker than I expected, almost black, and it smelled faintly of rust. The word appeared in other places too, once on the fogged glass of the bathroom mirror, dripping downward in uneven lines. Another time carved faintly into the wood of the headboard, letters shallow but unmistakable. I stopped questioning how. The nights became impossible. Each time I closed my eyes, I felt the house close around me. My body would stiffen, my chest tighten, and the whispers would return, low, constant, vibrating in my skull. The word pounded inside me, growing louder until it was the only thing I could hear. Malison, Malison, Malison. Each repetition struck like a hammer, driving deeper, splintering thought, eroding everything else. I tried covering my ears, burying my head beneath the pillow, but the sound was inside, not outside. The curse had hollowed me out and made space for itself. One night, the air itself seemed to thicken until I couldn't breathe. My arms flailed, nails clawing at the sheets, the walls, desperate for air that wasn't there. The room shrank around me, ceiling pressing low, the corners quivering with shadow. Just before darkness swallowed me whole, the pressure vanished. My lungs filled again, sharp and ragged, and in that moment, I realized something. It wasn't trying to kill me. It was teaching me how to live for it. I no longer keep track of days. The curtains stay drawn, the windows sealed. Time feels fractured, like the house has bent it to its own will. Sometimes I find myself standing in the cellar again without memory of walking down the steps, staring at the stone wall where the book once was. The letters no longer appear carved into paper or wood or mirrors. They live now beneath my skin, pulsing faintly, raised like scars that shift across my arms and chest in patterns I can't decipher. The curse has claimed me. I am no longer a tenant of this place, no longer a wanderer in someone else's ruin. The house is part of me, and I am part of it. When I breathe now, it isn't for me. Each inhale drags the word deeper. Each exhale releases it into the air. It spreads through the walls, the floors, the stone. I feel it ripple outward, into the soil beneath, into the roots of the ivy outside. It will not stop here. Malison. The word is alive. It has me. It will have you too. Fracture. It started with a sound, a faint crack like the snap of ice beneath a boot. At first, I thought it was the old timber settling, the way houses sometimes groan when the weather turns. But the sound didn't fade. It repeated, sharp and irregular, as though something deep inside the walls was breaking, splinter by splinter. I remember pausing in the hallway, my hand resting on the cold wooden banister. The house was silent except for that noise, fracture upon fracture, each one slightly louder than the last. The wallpaper seemed to tremble with it, the thin floral patterns quivering as though the whole structure was held together by nothing but a thin film of glue. There was a smell too, not immediate, but slow, creeping through the air like damp smoke. It reminded me of plaster dust mixed with rust, the metallic tang of blood hidden beneath crumbled stone. Every breath coated my throat with grit, dry and suffocating. The dust floated faintly in the weak beam of the ceiling light, and I felt as if I was breathing in the remnants of the house itself, consuming the collapse before it even happened. At night, the fractures grew louder. The sound wasn't confined to the walls anymore. It echoed through the floorboards beneath my bed, shivering up through the mattress, vibrating against my bones. It was as though I was lying directly on the skeleton of the house, each breath sinking with its decay. I couldn't sleep. My body felt wired, heart thrumming in time with the cracking. The mirrors were the first to show me what was really happening. I woke one morning, my head pounding, the taste of iron on my tongue. When I stumbled into the bathroom, I froze. The glass was split, not shattered, just a single long fracture running diagonally across the reflection. My face was divided, bisected by a jagged white scar. The split side seemed different, the skin pale and stretched, the eye deeper in its socket, glinting with something that wasn't quite me. When I blinked, the crack was gone. The mirror was whole again, flawless, smooth. I reached out, fingertips grazing the cool surface, but my skin still remembered the cold shadow of that fracture. It lingered the way pain does after you've struck a nerve. From that morning on, fractures appeared everywhere. In the kitchen tiles, in the plaster ceiling, in the panes of the windows. Always subtle, always fleeting, as if the house was showing me pieces of its true state before quickly stitching itself back together. But each time, the cracks grew deeper, the divisions sharper. And it wasn't only the house. I began to feel fractures in myself. The first was in my hand. I was holding a glass, and for no reason, it slipped from my grip and shattered against the floor. My fingers tingled as though the bones inside them had splintered. When I looked, the skin was intact, but beneath the surface, I felt fissures radiating outward, spiderwebbing through the marrow. Later, I felt it in my chest. A sharp snap when I bent down to pick something off the floor. Pain bloomed outward, and for a brief moment, I couldn't breathe. The sensation passed, but the awareness remained. Something in me was coming apart, the same way the house was. The noises in the night changed. They weren't just the creak of timber or the crumble of stone anymore. They became more deliberate, more organic. Wet snaps, muffled cracks, like joints dislocating, like vertebrae shifting under strain. I would lie frozen in bed, my eyes wide in the dark, listening to the fractures multiply until the air itself felt brittle, ready to shatter. One evening, the light bulb in the hallway burst. Glass rained down, tiny shards scattering across the wooden floor, glittering faintly in the dimness from the window. As I swept them into a pile, I realized the fragments didn't reflect me. They showed warped images of the house instead. Walls bowing inward, ceilings split wide, shadows bleeding through the cracks like oil. The smell worsened. It wasn't just plaster and rust anymore. It carried something sourer, something closer to decay. The odor rose strongest near the cellar door. That door had always felt wrong to me, its frame slightly crooked, as though it had been forced into place against the will of the house. Every time I passed it, the air grew denser, harder to draw into my lungs, and the sound of fracturing was loudest there, echoing faintly from below, a chorus of cracks spreading in the dark. I avoided it, but the house didn't let me stay away. I began to lose time. I would wake standing at the top of the cellar steps, my hand on the splintered railing, the air heavy with dust and damp. I wouldn't remember how I'd gotten there, only the gnawing sensation that something had guided me in my sleep. I would retreat to my bed, forcing myself to stay awake until exhaustion pulled me under again. But it always ended the same, with me back at that threshold, staring into the black below, listening to the sound of fractures building to a slow crescendo. The worst came when the fractures began to appear in reality itself. I woke in the living room once, my head throbbing, the world around me split. Not broken in the way of glass or stone, but fractured like a mirror dropped onto concrete. Lines ran across the air, jagged white rifts tearing through space itself. Through the cracks, I could see pieces of other places, dark rooms lined with chains, corridors wet with dripping water, stone walls crawling with mold. The images shimmered faintly, fading when I blinked, but always returning sharper when my eyes adjusted. The fractures weren't confined to the house anymore. They spread into me, into the world. Now, every reflection shows me a divided self. My eyes never align properly in the glass. One side looks more alive than the other. Sometimes, I catch the split reflection smiling when I am not. My shadow fractures too, lines running through its dark body, each piece twitching separately, out of sync with my movements. I've stopped fighting it. There's no way to resist when the very air quivers with the threat of collapse. I can feel my bones now, every joint, every segment of spine, pulsing with fractures invisible to the naked eye. They deepen each night, widening slowly, pulling me apart piece by piece. The house groans with me. Each crack in my body echoes in the walls, each snap of marrow mirrored by splinters in the floorboards. We are aligned now, collapsing together, sharing one slow undoing. Sometimes, when the air splits open wide enough, I see figures in the fractures. Not fully formed, just outlines, hunched and trembling, their limbs bent at unnatural angles. They crawl along the edges of the rifts, their fingers long, their nails dragging across the surfaces of reality. They peer through at me with faces blurred like smeared ink. I know they are waiting for the moment when the cracks finally give way. It will happen soon. I can feel the fractures reaching their limit, straining against whatever thin thread holds them closed. The smell of rot fills every breath, my skin prickles with the sensation of splitting, and the house itself leans as though bowing to inevitable collapse. When the last fracture breaks, there won't be a distinction between house and body, between reality and what waits beyond. Everything will shatter, everything will open, and I will fall through.